Hello, folks. This is your Peachy update for the 5th. And boy, do we have peaches. Because on the 4th, there were many peaches. Unfortunately, they were all rotten. If you did not listen to or watch the Nadler show, you really aren't going to have context on this. So you need to go on to C-SPAN and you need to watch the whole thing. I'm not going to tell you that's an easy thing to do. It's hours and hours and hours. And quite honestly, there's an awful lot of just repetitive stuff. But if that was where you came into this entire impeachment saga with that hearing, you saw an utterly damning portrait of the President of the United States. The Republicans did maybe the best job they could given the material they had and the fact that they were outnumbered 3-1 on the panel. But you just, I mean, the imagery that was concocted by the Democrats during this hearing was savage in its import. It really was. And I have, hey, listen, political theater is always, part and parcel of this kind of thing. So I have to give the Democrats some credit for what they did because, frankly, there were some questions about whether or not Nadler could actually pull something like this off. And he did quite well. I have to give a little bit of credit to Matt Gaetz, congressman in the 1st District of Florida, and currently my congressman, but not for much longer, because given the tiny little amount of time he had, the 5 minutes, he managed to score some pretty good points. But on the other hand, here's the basic issue that you have, which is that the essence of the argument is that the mere solicitation of an investigation is standing alone an impeachable offense. It is a designation by the person doing it that they're an emperor, and therefore that's impeachable, period. I have to say that is a remarkable summation by the so-called witnesses. And frankly, if you want my opinion, there are several colleges that as of today should be destroyed, just utterly destroyed. And anyone that has a degree from these institutions needs to be blackballed, along with all of their employees, all their staff, and every one of their professors, because the premise that they were running during this hearing was outrageous in the extreme. It wasn't just partisan. It was a blanket load of bullshit. And to do this on the national stage was so little attention paid to facts, where anyone that says anything is all of a sudden, well, this is what the report says. Okay, we're going to get to that in a minute. That just belies all credibility. We had one witness who said, if the facts are as the other side is propounding, this is very serious. But the case hasn't been made. And essentially what you're doing is you're allowing somebody to come forth with the most crazy of allegations and then say, well, those are the facts and therefore we need to impeach and remove the president. That's not how the justice system is supposed to work. And yes, impeachment is a political process. It's not a judicial process. But the basic principles of fairness remain. And there is a very, very serious problem here. So let's look at a couple of things, because I think when you boil this down, there are two elements of this entire story that are what all of it turns on. And the first is there a problem with the President of the United States asking a nation to look at a retrospective action, not something that's happening right now, but something that happened before, when there is a treaty that says we are supposed to cooperate on criminal affairs, and does it matter who the person who might be targeted is in that request? Now, for context, the Ukraine and the United States have a treaty that mandates that we are to cooperate in these matters. And the president is the head of the executive, and the executive is in charge of enforcing the law. So therefore, clearly the answer has to be no. There's nothing wrong with doing this. And furthermore, you cannot escape prosecution or investigation by declaring your candidacy for a public office. That's crazy. Otherwise, I could go find one of the congressmen that I heard that was driving me to rage in my car and turn around, go up to Washington, D.C., kill them, and then turn around and declare candidacy for public office, and you can't arrest me, you can't prosecute me, you can't throw me in jail. Well, that's absurd. That's absolutely absurd. And it doesn't matter who in the blankety blanket is. I mean, does it matter if I run for the office of the person who I just killed? I don't think so. I don't think it matters whose office it is, nor does it matter who is going to prosecute me. I'm still supposed to be investigated, tried, and prosecuted for my crime, assuming there was one. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't over in Ukraine. We don't know. But what we do know is that the Biden family had a tremendous incentive to the tune of $50,000 to $80,000 a month in order to shut down these investigations. Because if the company had been killed and bankrupted, at the absolute minimum, Hunter would have lost his job, and therefore he would have lost his income. And so that is standing alone, that is a sufficient reason for the Vice President of the United States to want to see this stopped. There doesn't need to be anything more than that. There doesn't need to be evidence of criminal conduct on the part of Hunter Biden. That's not necessary. From where I sit, somewhere around $600,000 a year is certainly a hell of a reason to shut an investigation down. Because if the company gets forced into liquidation, he's going to lose his job. And so is everybody else on the board. But, come on, folks. Let's start looking at things from a realistic perspective. Okay. So you cannot escape the consequences of your actions by declaring a candidacy for office. I think that's just a basic principle of fairness. Now let's go to the next thing. Was there a bribe or solicitation of a bribe? Remember, Zelensky has said on multiple separate occasions that there was not. All right. So the question becomes, is there any evidence that the President of the United States deliberately sandbagged military aid for the purpose of gaining an investigation into corruption? And did he do that with the intention of damaging a political rival? And that's the key, because if you can establish that, if you can actually get there, you have an impeachable offense. All right? And hey, listen, I don't care if you like the president or not. If you can get there, you have an impeachable offense. Now, here's the problem. When Adam Schiff was running his little investigation over the Intelligence Committee, he had a bunch of depositions that he took in secret. A number of them have been released, but there is one very specific one that was not. And it is of an individual. It was held on a weekend. And I saw a brief little press conference that was given on C-SPAN right after some of the people came out of the skiff when it was done. It was an individual within the NSC, I think it was the NSC, that has actual firsthand knowledge of why the aid was held up and why it was ultimately released. And this is a person who was actually a participant in the decision process. So this person would have real, no bullshit, firsthand knowledge of what actually happened and why. And this is important, folks. That deposition has not been released. And yet it was Schiff and his pals that conducted it, and it's been classified. Now, why hasn't it been released? And think about this. If you had incontrovertible proof that the President of the United States held up almost $400 million in military aid to the Ukraine, and he did it because he wanted Hunter and Joe Biden investigated. All right, now that's a serious charge. But if there is actual evidence of this, and this individual testified to that under oath in the skiff, that person would have been brought out into the open to bring that testimony out in public, and it would have been in the report. It's not there. That person's testimony has not been released. Why not? Remember, the Republicans cannot release it. The Republicans do not have the ability to alter or tamper with the classification on it because it's not their testimony. It's the Democrats' testimony, and it's been classified as secret, which means they cannot release it, and it was taken in the skiff. All right. There's only one reasonable explanation for the failure to release that transcript, and that's that the evidence in that transcript is exculpatory. In other words, there is not just a alternative possibility of an explanation for why that aid was not released and why it was held up. There's actual evidence of why it was held up, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the Bidens. And if that comes out and was released, this entire thing collapses. It literally turns into dust. Now, I can't prove that that's the reason it isn't out there. But just as the Democrats like to draw inferences from President Trump supposedly obstructing their investigation, I'm free to draw inferences when somebody takes testimony from someone who supposedly has incriminating evidence and then refuses to release it to anybody to be used, including the Judiciary Committee, who does not have this information. They don't have it in classified form either. And if there's stuff in there that's classified that you can't let out, okay. But there's absolutely no reason that the Judiciary Committee members could not go view it in the skiff and see that transcript. And yet it has not been released by Schiff. Why not? And there's only one reasonable explanation for that, folks. And that is it blows up the game. And so Schiff is going to protect that because it is first-hand, not hearsay. Not, well, I overheard a phone conversation. A guy was holding the phone out, and I could hear somebody screaming. I couldn't really hear what he was saying, but I heard the one hand. Come on, folks. That's not evidence. Okay, you couldn't get that admitted into a court. And yeah, this isn't a judicial proceeding. But if there is exculpatory evidence, the basic rules of fairness in any justice system say you got to let it out. You got to put it out there so people have it. And what you saw today was a ridiculously one-sided presentation where the rules were handicapped in such a way that that was how it was scripted to come out, and it did. I want you to take this away from what happened today and where the Democrats are going. The Democrats and Nadler, along with Schiff, are trying to start a civil war. There was zero balance to this, folks. Absolutely zero. They're going to vote out articles of impeachment. I'm absolutely certain of it. I'm also certain that the Senate will kill them because, quite frankly, without that one transcript, you can't evaluate anything that was said today. You just can't. You got to have that. And it's being intentionally withheld. So this is very similar to a cop that busts somebody with a baggie full of drugs. And it turns out that there's video evidence of them planting the baggie of drugs, and they suppress that. And they send this guy to jail because he had drugs, but they weren't his drugs. If that's what the Democrats are doing, if that's what they're really willing to do with this country and with the United States, there isn't any coming back from this. This isn't just a schism that's going to be created. You know, there's the division that's created by impeachment is always extreme. But if this is being done under false pretense, and every piece of evidence that we have at this point says it is, then the risks that the Democrats are taking in doing this for the crazy side of their party, which is apparently much larger than it would first appear, is literally the destruction of civil order in the United States. And if and when it happens, folks, you need to remember who did this. It wasn't the Republicans. I'm no fan of Matt Gaetz, and I'm no fan of Donald Trump. All right? I didn't vote for either one of them. But if the Democrats are not the ones who are held accountable for this when it occurs, look, there's 535 of them, and, 60, 70 million Americans have voted for Trump, and 330 Americans in total. 535 against 330 million is a bad number. All right, those are bad numerical odds. But if you think these people are not crazy enough to do something like this, all you have to do is listen today. Because yes, they are. They absolutely are. And what you heard today was a bunch of scolds that, God, this woman, I don't remember her name. You'll have to excuse me. But this woman, she went on about how we have to take on the Soviet Union. And oh my God, we have to do this so that, so Ukraine fights them over there so they don't fight over here. Has anybody paid any attention to the fact that Russia today has a GDP that's 8% of ours and a defense budget of $60 billion? They're not a threat to the United States. What are you people smoking? Okay? You want to talk about the people that are a threat to the United States? It's south of there. Well, and a little further to the east. That would be China. Hey, take a look at Beijing. Now, there's a problem. But no. We got to talk about impeachment and Russia and Ukraine. Wake up, folks. What these people are doing, the risks they're taking are extreme. And what they're doing is extreme. I was stunned by what I heard today. And if this is all you've got, then yeah, I can see where you jump to a conclusion because it was scripted that way on purpose. I want the transcript of that deposition in the basement from the one person who claims, supposedly, has firsthand knowledge of why the $400 million was held up and ultimately why it was released. And you can bet the reason for that is not because the president wanted Joe Biden knocked out of the presidential race. Because if that was the case, if that was the testimony, it would be on the front page of the New York Times. I'm your ticker guy. And if I were you, I'd be thinking about your preparations.